Job is to do your job, not to worry about me. That's what I'm saying. Well, I worry about me. You worry about your self.
And I don't know why you're smiling.
Because I can.
Well,
because I can. It's not a crime to smile.
It's not a crime.
Continue what you were saying.
But it doesn't help you, all right, to irritate people.
All right.
And you have a lot at stake in this case.
Who's calling the vote?
Brice.
What was your vote?
I'm the one that said no. I just said yeah.
He laughed. He smirked. He interrupted the court like he had nothing to lose. For years, Brice Rhodes acted as though the justice system couldn't touch him, calm in the face of devastating charges, even when grieving families sat just feet away. But what happens when someone from your own circle decides they've stayed silent long enough? This case took a sudden turn the moment one voice stepped forward, revealing a side of the story no one was prepared for. So what really happened behind those closed doors? Let's take a closer look. The smirk before the fall. In 2016, the city of Louisville was rocked by a brutal and disturbing case involving 3 lives lost, 2 teenage brothers, and an adult man. The crime scenes were violent, the aftermath haunting, and the person at the center of it all was a local rapper named Brice Rhodes. From the start, Rhodes denied any involvement. He portrayed himself as a victim of targeted accusations and maintained his innocence throughout the legal process. Over time, the case dragged on. Delays mounted, and without strong physical evidence, no surveillance video, no immediate eyewitnesses, it began to seem as if Rhodes might escape accountability altogether. The lack of hard proof gave Rhodes a visible sense of confidence, one that played out for all to see in court. Footage from the trial shows him smirking at inopportune moments, even in the presence of grieving families. He often spoke out of turn, challenged the judge, and disrupted proceedings with frequent emotional outbursts. At one point, he implied that the prosecutor and a former judge were having an affair, and at others, he referred to officials in the courtroom as racists. These actions prompted multiple interventions by court officers and painted a picture of someone who saw the courtroom not as a place of justice, but as a stage.
Not a crime to smile, is it?
I didn't say you were committing.
Okay then.
I'm saying you're not helping yourself.
Continue what you were saying. I'm allowed to smile.
I would suggest you do what helps you, not what hurts you.
Okay.
That's
do what
all.
I want to do.
Well,
Let's
do
get
what
that
you want to
understood.
do. That's fine.
Let's get that understood.
His behavior drew widespread attention and led many to question whether he truly understood the gravity of the charges against him. During sentencing, Jefferson Circuit Court Judge Julie Kalin remarked, "This has been by far one of the most tragic cases I've ever been involved in. It really stands out for how profoundly sad it is on every level. Everything about this case is horrific." These comments reflected the weight the court placed not just on the crimes, but on how they had been handled in the public eye. Rhodes's demeanor stood in stark contrast to the seriousness of the accusations. Despite his courtroom theatrics, the case eventually took a dramatic turn. In December 2023, Antoine Carter, a former friend and associate of Rhodes, chose to speak up. His decision to testify would become the case's turning point. Carter gave a chilling account of what he saw inside Rhodes's home on the night the 2 teenage brothers, Maurice Gordon and Larry Ordway, were slain. According to his testimony, Rhodes orchestrated every step, made the decisions, and gave the orders that led to their deaths.
He made Maurice on his knees and beg for forgiveness. And he put a toboggan over his head, and he put a rag in his mouth. And then he stabbed, we moved Maurice to the side, and we brought his brother, and we put the toboggan over his head. He put the toboggan over his head and put the sock in his mouth. And started stabbing him too, he made us stab him.
He made y'all stab him? So you in court stabbed him too? Alright, how many times do you think you stabbed him?
I stabbed him 1 time.
Carter told the court that at one point, those present were asked to vote on whether the boys should be allowed to live. It was a decision, he said, that ended with their deaths. Rhodes, according to Carter, not only initiated the violence but also demanded that others take part. Carter admitted that he stabbed one of the boys under pressure and that the atmosphere was one of fear and control. His testimony gave prosecutors the details they had been missing for years: confirming Rhodes's role not just as a participant, but as the orchestrator of the slayings. With Carter's statements on record, the prosecution's case shifted from speculation to substance. No longer relying on circumstantial evidence alone, the jury had direct testimony pointing to Rhodes's involvement and leadership in the crimes. The performance in court, the smirks, and the outbursts suddenly meant very little in the face of detailed eyewitness accounts. The man who once believed silence would protect him now faced the full consequences of one person finally speaking up. The weight of Carter's testimony not only gave prosecutors a narrative to follow, it forced the court to reconcile with the fact that this case had gone unsolved for years, in large part due to fear and silence. In a trial filled with delays, Rhodes had gone through at least a dozen defense attorneys, many of whom either withdrew due to threats or were dismissed after clashing with him. These repeated disruptions, along with mental health evaluations and pandemic-related postponements, dragged the legal process out for nearly 8 years. As Judge Kalin later noted, this drawn-out timeline compounded the suffering of the victims' families, who waited nearly a decade for a resolution. Even as the trial neared its end, Rhodes's courtroom behavior didn't change. According to court records and witness accounts, he continued to display disregard for the seriousness of the proceedings. He interrupted attorneys, made sarcastic comments, and often seemed more concerned with his own image than the outcome of the trial. But once the guilty verdict was read, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. What had once felt like a performance was now met with the reality of life without parole. The silence from the defense table was stark, contrasting with the loud, often disruptive presence Rhodes had maintained throughout the trial. What Carter saw and shared. Antoine Carter's testimony brought a chilling layer of detail to a case that had remained uncertain for years. In December 2023, during court proceedings, Carter began to reveal information that until then had never been fully shared with authorities. Among the key moments he described was a phone call between Brice Rhodes and the mother of the teenage victims, Maurice Gordon and Larry Ordway. According to Carter, the call centered on the shooting and came after Maurice had spoken to his mother about what happened.
There was a phone call that you overheard between the boy's mom and the defendant, right? You remember that?
Yeah.
Who was talking on the phone?
Shit, it was Larry and Maurice's mom and Brice.
It was who and Brice?
Larry and Maurice's mom.
Larry and Maurice's mother? Okay, thank you.
Carter confirmed that he had been to the house before, and on the night in question, he was there along with several others: Larry, Maurice, Corey, Brice, and additional individuals. He recalled that the group was smoking and drinking when an argument broke out between Corey and Larry. Carter stated that such disagreements were not unusual when they all hung out. However, what followed was anything but ordinary. During the altercation, Maurice picked up a knife in what Carter described as an aggressive manner, although he clarified that Maurice did not wave it at anyone. Rhodes then took the knife from Maurice and struck him. Carter said that Rhodes had already had knives and was familiar with them. After taking control of the situation, Rhodes reportedly said he was going to violate Maurice. Maurice did not resist, believing he was simply going to be hit. Carter testified that Maurice went along with it because Rhodes held a level of respect and dominance within their group. As the night unfolded, Carter said things turned far more serious. He recalled that Rhodes led both teenage boys, Maurice and Larry, into the bathroom, isolating them from everyone else. The rest of the group remained in the living room, where an unexpected and horrifying decision was made. A vote was taken on whether the two teens should live or die.
Is there a time where people in the house separate from Maurice?
Yeah. We put both of them in the bathroom and we took a vote.
Both who?
Larry and Maurice.
They're in the bathroom? And where are you guys?
Living room.
Carter testified that Rhodes initiated the vote. Although Carter initially said no, meaning he didn't want the boys to be slain, he admitted that he eventually went along with the decision. He explained to the court that he didn't feel safe and feared that refusing to follow the group could result in him facing the same fate. He also said he had no safe place to go and no way to escape. Following the vote, Carter described how Morris was bound, his hands tied behind his back, a sock placed in his mouth, and a covering put over his head. This all happened in the living room. Carter recounted how Rhodes punched Maurice several times in the chest, and then, after being handed a knife by another person named Tyron, began stabbing him in the torso. Maurice, still gagged, struggled to make noise but could not cry out. Carter noted that the stabbing continued until Maurice stopped breathing. The courtroom heard how the violence left minimal visible blood because the group had already placed sheets under Maurice to soak it up. Carter said the sheets were intended to help move the body afterward and identified Rhodes as the person who retrieved them. Once Maurice was dead, Carter stated, they moved his body toward the door and brought out Larry. Larry's hands were already bound with a belt, his eyes covered with a hat, and a sock placed in his mouth. Carter explained that Larry wasn't aware his brother had already died. When the stabbing began, Larry tried to fight back, attempting to break free from his restraints. Carter recalled the panic in Larry's response when he sensed something had gone terribly wrong. Carter could not provide an exact count of how many times Larry was stabbed, but said it was a lot. He stated that Rhodes stabbed Larry until he was dead, and then passed the knife to Carter. According to the testimony, Rhodes told them that everyone present had to be involved. Carter admitted to stabbing Larry 3 times before handing the knife back. He also said that Rhodes passed the knife to others, including Jackery Taylor, who reportedly stabbed Larry again even after he had died. After the slayings, Carter testified that Rhodes instructed everyone to help clean the scene. The bodies were placed in large plastic totes and, according to Carter, were then transported by Rhodes, Tyron, and another individual to an abandoned house. Carter said the plan was to destroy any evidence by setting fire to the property. Later, authorities discovered the charred remains of Maurice and Larry behind the abandoned house on River Park Drive near Shawnee Park. At the time, law enforcement had no idea that Carter had been involved or was aware of the details. It wasn't until he testified years later that the pieces started to fall into place. Carter's account filled the gaps in a case that had, for a long time, been stalled by a lack of evidence and conflicting narratives. His cooperation and detailed recollection of the events not only advanced the investigation, but also played a key role in bringing the case to trial and ultimately securing a conviction. By the time Carter came forward, the court had already spent years trying to sort through the confusion, delays, and disruptions caused during the lengthy pre-trial process. But his decision to speak brought clarity, helping the prosecution prove not only what happened, but who was responsible. Carter also provided insight into the mindset and group dynamics that led to such extreme violence. He described a situation where peer pressure, fear, and control dominated the room. According to his testimony, no one felt free to act independently or speak up without fearing retaliation. Carter explained that while some people in the group questioned what was happening, the environment created by Rhodes left them feeling trapped. He described Rhodes as someone who demanded loyalty and submission, reinforcing his authority by forcing others to participate in acts they would not have committed on their own. Beyond recounting the night of the slayings, Carter's testimony shed light on what happened afterward. He told the court that after the bodies were disposed of, there was a clear effort to erase all traces of the crime. Items were burned, blood was cleaned up, and those involved were told to remain silent. Carter said he lived with the memory of that night for years, haunted by what he saw and what he did. He admitted that while he initially stayed quiet to protect himself, the burden eventually became too heavy to carry. It was this internal conflict between fear and guilt that led him to break his silence and testify, providing the court with the critical testimony it had been missing for nearly a decade, the testimony that changed everything. For nearly 8 years, the case against Brice Rhodes remained clouded by uncertainty, delays, and a lack of solid evidence. But when Antoine Carter decided to come forward, everything changed. His testimony shifted the course of the trial in a dramatic way, transforming it from a case based on limited proof into one supported by detailed first-hand accounts. Before taking the stand, Carter had stayed quiet for years. He told the court that fear kept him silent. Fear of the consequences, fear of being targeted, and fear of being tied to something he didn't fully control. But that silence, he said, became impossible to live with. According to Carter, he had reached a point where carrying the truth alone was no longer something he could endure. He explained during his testimony that although he had opportunities to walk away, he didn't speak up initially because he didn't want to get caught up. But time brought regret. In his own words, Carter said he believed that if he had spoken earlier, something might have changed. He admitted to feeling guilty for not trying to stop what had happened. That guilt, combined with the weight of what he had witnessed, pushed him to finally tell the truth.
I wish the outcome was different. If I knew this wouldn't happen, I wouldn't have hung out with Maurice and Larry.
Carter's decision to testify didn't just shift the mood in the courtroom. It helped fill the gaps that years of investigation hadn't been able to close. According to WDRB News, his cooperation came after much of the physical evidence in the case had fallen short. There were no surveillance cameras, no eyewitnesses willing to speak initially, and no confessions. His testimony brought forward information that the state had long been waiting for. Once the prosecution rested its case, the defense attempted to undermine the claims, but Carter's testimony stood firm under questioning. The jury, presented with this new and deeply personal perspective, reached its decision.
Thank you. Has the jury been able to reach a verdict in this case? All right, if you could please hand the form to Deputy Mills. Thank you. Verdict Form 2A. We, the jury, found the defendant guilty of murder.
On December 18th, 2023, the jury found Brice Rhodes guilty on all counts related to the triple homicide. The courtroom fell into silence as the judge moved juror by juror, confirming the verdict. Each responded in turn, yes or yes ma'am, until all 12 had voiced their agreement. The judge then asked the attorneys to approach, signaling the official close of a long and emotionally charged trial. In March 2024, Rhodes received his sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. It was the outcome the victims' families had been waiting nearly a decade to hear. The article noted that even after years of legal delay, caused in part by Rhodes' own courtroom behavior, repeated changes in attorneys, and a competency evaluation, the case finally reached a conclusion supported by compelling testimony. Carter, who had admitted to participating under pressure, was also sentenced, but his cooperation and decision to testify were taken into account. The judge recognized that while Carter had a role in covering up what had happened, he ultimately helped the court understand the full scope of events. Because of this, Carter was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with the opportunity for early release depending on behavior and progress in rehabilitation. According to court statements cited by WDRB, the judge acknowledged that Carter could have walked free had he chosen to remain silent. But his truth-telling, even if delayed, brought value to the justice process and helped bring resolution to a case that had remained stalled for far too long. What began as a courtroom filled with uncertainty ended with a clear, unanimous verdict. Carter's voice, once silent, became the key that unlocked the full story. His decision to step forward helped bring a measure of closure not just to the victims' families, but to a community that had spent years waiting for justice. In the end, the courtroom saw more than just legal arguments. It witnessed how the truth can finally break through, even when it comes from the most unexpected source. Carter's testimony also demonstrated the emotional complexity of someone who had been both a witness and a participant. While the court acknowledged his cooperation, the details he revealed painted a painful portrait of someone who had been manipulated and trapped in a violent environment. His willingness to admit his role, not just in the cover-up, but in the physical act of violence, added credibility to his statements. According to WDRB's reporting, the judge emphasized that Carter's delayed truth still carried weight, especially because it allowed the court to piece together what had really occurred inside that house. The prosecution relied on his testimony to explain the chain of events that led to the slayings, making it one of the most pivotal moments of the trial. In many ways, Carter's role reshaped how the case was understood, not just legally, but publicly. His statement added a human element to a case that had, for years, been defined by legal delays, Rhodes's courtroom outbursts, and unanswered questions. With few physical clues available, the jury had been left searching for something to believe in. Carter's words gave them that. He didn't present himself as a hero or as someone seeking sympathy. He simply told what he saw, what he did, and why he had waited so long to say it. That honesty resonated in a courtroom that had seen years of denial and disruption, ultimately reinforcing the idea that even delayed truth can help deliver justice. Delays that stalled justice. The case against Brice Rhodes did not move swiftly through the court system. In fact, it became known not only for its horrific details, but also for its extensive delays and complications that spanned nearly 8 years. Much of the stall stemmed from Rhodes himself, who cycled through a series of attorneys over the years. Some of these lawyers withdrew due to threats or non-cooperation from their clients. Others were dismissed after failing to establish a working relationship with him. These disruptions extended the timeline significantly and frustrated both the prosecution and the families of the victims. Further complications arose when Rhodes was ordered to undergo a mental competency evaluation, which delayed proceedings for more than a year. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic added another layer of obstruction. With courts temporarily shut down or operating at reduced capacity, the trial was pushed back again, prolonging the trauma for the victims' families. It was not until late 2023 that significant momentum finally returned to the case, with testimony from co-defendants and eyewitnesses reigniting public attention. During those years, Rhodes made headlines not just for the severity of the charges, but for his alarming courtroom behavior. He frequently interrupted proceedings, at times lashing out verbally at judges, attorneys, and prosecutors. In one incident, he accused a former judge and the lead prosecutor of having an affair. He also repeatedly called members of the court racist, heightening tensions in an already emotionally charged environment. His comments were often viewed as attempts to derail proceedings or provoke reactions, though the court remained focused on the legal process. Judge Julie Kalin, who presided over the final phase of the trial, ultimately ruled that Brice Rhodes was mentally competent to stand trial. However, she also determined that he was ineligible for the death penalty due to a documented history of serious mental illness and intellectual disability. This decision did not absolve Rhodes of accountability, but it did remove the option of capital punishment, something that had been debated given his erratic courtroom behavior and diagnosis of bipolar disorder. During the jury sentencing, defense attorney Thaisa Howarth appealed to the jurors' humanity, saying, "No matter what he did on his worst days, Brice is still a human being." She urged them to consider his lifelong struggles, adding, "I'm asking you to have just a little bit of hope with Brice," pointing to his history of childhood abuse, bipolar disorder, and intellectual disability. Despite these legal maneuvers and years of disruption, the court pushed forward. By the time the trial resumed in earnest, prosecutors had assembled a compelling case backed by first-hand testimony and evidence. Judge Kalin remained firm, telling Rhodes during sentencing that it would be a dishonor not to follow the jury's recommendation. Her words underlined the gravity of the crimes and served as a conclusion to years of courtroom chaos, accusations, and emotional upheaval. The emotional toll on families. While the legal system took nearly a decade to bring the case to a conclusion, the emotional suffering endured by the families of the victims remained consistent and devastating. During the sentencing phase, several family members spoke directly to the court, offering glimpses into the pain and loss they had endured. Jackie Partee, the grandmother of one of the teenage victims, delivered an impassioned statement about how Rhodes had treated the boys like trash. Her words underscored the lasting emotional damage inflicted on those left behind. Debbie Wren, another grandmother of one of the slain brothers, told the court she was relieved to hear the life sentence verdict. She said she didn't want to risk the possibility that Rhodes could one day harm another child. Her fear and sense of justice were echoed by others who attended the sentencing. To them, the outcome was about more than punishment. It was about protecting future lives and honoring those who were lost. "He's evil, and he needs to be in prison," Wren told the judge. The impact of Rhodes' actions stretched beyond the direct victims and their immediate families. Chastity Stoner, the mother of Christopher Jones's son, shared how her child responded in the face of unimaginable loss. She told the court that rather than being defeated by trauma, her son had thrived. He maintained a 4.0 GPA, stayed in school, and even received an offer to play football at the University of Louisville. Her statement provided a powerful counter to the violence of the case, a message that resilience could emerge even in the darkest moments. Even as sentencing brought some form of resolution, emotions in the courtroom remained raw. Prosecutor Elizabeth Jones Brown, who led the state's case, said it was a good feeling to bring justice to the victims' families. She urged the jury to consider the full weight of what had happened, describing the slayings as horrific and highlighting Rhodes' criminal history, which included assault, burglary, and robbery convictions prior to the triple slayings. Ultimately, while the trial offered no way to undo the past, it did deliver clarity and accountability. Family members spoke not just for justice, but for peace. And perhaps for the first time since 2016, they could begin to find some. With the verdict delivered and Rhodes sentenced to life without parole, the long, painful process of healing could finally begin. Another voice that stood out during sentencing was that of a community member who had followed the case closely for years. They reminded the court that the pain extended beyond the courtroom, into schools, neighborhoods, and friendships left broken in the wake of the slayings. The community had been gripped by fear and sorrow since the boys' deaths, unsure whether justice would ever come. This speaker emphasized how the verdict not only honored the victims, but also signaled to the broader public that their lives had value and that the justice system had not forgotten them. Their words served as a reminder that healing wasn't just personal, it was collective. Thanks for watching. Do you think Brice Rhodes ever believed someone close to him would break the silence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. If you found this video compelling, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime breakdowns. And before you go, check out one of the 2 videos on your screen right now. You won't want to miss them.